This is Dream Power Radio, the place where your dreams turn into reality. Here is your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Dream Power Radio. I'm your host, certified dream life coach, Debbie Spector-Weissman. This is the place where we talk about dreams, both daytime and nighttime dreams, and how you can use them to make the internal shift to a life you love and rediscover the truth of who you really are. Every once in a while, I like to take time in this podcast to explore the idea of what it really means to live your dream life. Most of the experts and guests I've had on this program speak in depth about how they had to overcome traumas in their lives, learn from the mistakes they've made along the way, and grow into powerful beings who are unafraid to take life on and live it on their own terms. One person who checks off all these boxes herself is my guest today, Patricia Gavin. Patricia's story exemplifies a dream life in action. Patricia's had many roles in her life: Air Force officer, wife, mother, widow, real estate agent, world traveler. But she credits her work with yoga as fueling her passion for personal wellness and growth. Patricia's also the author of several books, including 6 a.m. in LA and All the Right Steps, 30 Days in Phuket. Welcome to Dream Power Radio, Patricia.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure.
It's my pleasure, too. And Patricia, I understand it was an injury that led you to discover yoga for yourself. So tell me what happened.
Yeah, I was traveling and I was in Paris. I had a lovely hotel room. It was during Fashion Week and I was lucky to get it because most of the rooms were sold out. But I noticed it was tiled to the ceiling and I went to get my shampoo. And when I came back, I slipped, actually catching the shower head because it was lodged in a cradle and the water pressure had it dancing across the room when I came back in. So I slept. And when I came back from Europe, I had kind of a frozen shoulder. So I was back in the hot yoga room in Georgetown here in DC. And I was having trouble opening my shoulders. So a friend of mine who worked for Secret Service, had been a boss and also a yoga practitioner, said, you should come to Bikram Yoga. So I went to Bikram Yoga and I suffered through probably the first 10 classes, but then my shoulders started to open from the postures that they had us do in class. And I thought, I'm sticking with this for the rest of my life. So that's kind of how I got my introduction into the hot yoga world, was a slip and fall.
And then you actually went ahead then and trained as a Bikram yoga instructor under Bikram himself. So what was that like?
Well, I went to Bikram's last teacher training in LA, and it was really like the United Nations of yoga, I have to say, because it was held for 60 days in the, it's now the Hyatt, but it was the Radisson at the LAX airport. And so there were 300 of us from all over the world in practicing yoga. And then we would have visiting teachers come in and teach a morning or evening class. Usually Bikram taught the evening class, and either his wife Rajashri or daughter Laju or Anurag, his son, would teach in the morning. So it was it felt very familial. At the same time, he was going through litigation at that time. And so it wound up being his last teacher training here in the States. I attended recertification in Acapulco, and I believe now he's doing the teacher training after COVID in Thailand twice a year. It was, for me, formative. I guess that would be one of the best words to capture the experience.
And for those in my audience who are unfamiliar with Bikram yoga, how does that differ from what we would consider,
regular? Well, there's all kinds of different modalities of yoga, but typically Bikram yoga is 12 standing postures preceded by a breathing exercise, and then 14 floor postures on the floor. So you have the standing and the floor postures, and basically they're done in a heated room of 105 degrees. So it's very sweaty in there. It's a very sweaty environment, but it's very great. It's very good for changing the fascia in the body and realigning, muscle tissue, I would say, because the postures you proceed with the breathing exercise to oxygenate the body. And then through the standing postures, you get the cardio up. But then the floor postures, you dam the blood up in different organs to clean the body from the inside out. So it has an invigorating effect on the body, I would say, and also the mind.
Mm. Well,
Just the circulation and the respiration alone for most of us these days who are sedentary.
well, let's talk a little bit about how it changes the mind. So can you talk how being a practitioner of Bikram yoga has changed your life?
Well, the first thing is the pranayama breathing, because a lot of people breathe through their mouth. So when you learn to breathe properly, long and slow through the nose, is very calming on the nervous system, because you're shifting your nervous system from the sympathetic fight or flight to the parasympathetic rest and digest. So that's the first part of class, because your body heals faster in an environment where you're breathing slowly through the nose rather than through the mouth. It also lowers cortisol when you breathe through the nose. So for people who are trying to lose weight or manage anxiety, it helps with that as well. So I think those are the number 1 and 2 reasons for the yoga. One of the benefits of it is it speeds healing and it, calms the nervous system. And I think for many people that it becomes a moving meditation where it quiets the mind. So you don't have as much chatter and intrusive thoughts.
And
So
for people who want to get a good benefit from yoga, how regularly would you say they need to practice it?
well, everybody wants to have a daily practice, unless you're a teacher, if that always happens. But usually 2 to 3 times a week is plenty to get the benefits of the yoga. And usually the last 24 to 48 hours, you feel that calm kind of sense. And then it kind of wears off and it's time to, go ahead and exercise the body again. There's 8 limbs of yoga. So the asanas, or the postures, and the breathing are just 2 of the 6. So when you become a yoga practitioner, you focus on a lot of the other aspects of yoga, which are kind of like the do's and the don'ts in terms of lifestyle and choices that you make. Maintaining cleanliness would be an observation. A restraint might be not hurting anyone, ahimsa, avoiding harm. So you practice those. And then you also do meditation, which is kind of quieting the mind and looking inward at your behavior. So there's the 8 limbs, and obviously the 8th limb of yoga is samadhi, which is like kind of bliss, And I think the more you take care of your body, that comes with time and practice.
Right.
It's a sense of well-being that comes from it.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of changes did you see in yourself as a person?
I remember, I was sending postcards back to my home studio in Alexandria. And after having 3 children practicing as a Bikram instructor, I noticed my belly got a lot tighter. During the 9 weeks I was in LA, I noticed I was, eating a normal diet, but not overeating or eating too much. But the daily practice, the 2 classes a day, it tends to take 600 calories off the body. If you're a man, it probably takes more. But if you're doing 2 classes a day, it really eviscerates the fat off the body. So I lost a lot of fat off of my body that I probably hadn't. I probably have lost that since I was like in my 20s. So it felt like it gave me back my health from my 20s, I would say.
So would you consider yourself now healthier than you were when you were in your 20s?
Well, I don't know about healthier, but I think that my mind is calmer than it was in my 20s. I think that comes with wisdom, comes with age, and experience. But I think that the biggest thing is that I think yoga makes you very non-reactive. I think when I was younger, I was a lot more emotional. And I think that as I've gone through my practice, it's had a sort of a leveling effect emotionally. I don't see myself as reactive. I guess that would be, I'm more observant than reactive. I think that would be the way to describe it. As far as health goes, having been hit by a car in the last 2 years has been a challenge mobility wise. So it's also been a challenge dietary wise because you're more sedentary. So those 2 challenges kind of led me back, and I did my certification for Yoga Alliance through Yoga Renew. And I'd been an ambassador for the Yogi Insurance, which insures yoga instructors, and they are part of the sponsorship of Yoga Renew, which offers online teacher training. And I did their online program after COVID, which I found very beneficial. I mean, especially with the meditation, because they have a Zoom schedule where you can tune in and meditate. So that's my plug for Yoga Renew.
So let's go back a second. You said that you actually got hit by a car. Did your yoga training help you in your recovery from that?
Well, it's what happened. I got kind of tapped as I was leaving a crosswalk at the airport, and I landed on my left foot. And for a while, I thought I was okay because I didn't have any symptoms right away. But I started standing and flying. I was flying for American Airlines, and I was standing 14 hours as a flight attendant. And I started to have feet problems. And so when they started working on my feet, and I went out to have physical therapy, I started having my knee lock, and an MRI revealed basically that I've been flying on a torn meniscus. And I talked with a woman. Her name is, she has a business called Flying Feet, and she's the podiatrist for Emirates Airlines. And she said, when you're really flexible, like I had become in yoga, your other parts of your body compensate. So my calves and my feet were compensating for the tear. And I didn't know I'd torn the meniscus. So it's been a year of physical therapy to kind of get my mobility back. And that's been a little scary. I think I have a lot more empathy for sports people. I went to see Challenger it's a tennis movie with the Zendaya, and she winds up hurting her knee and then going back out in the court thinking she can play on it. And it doesn't quite work that way. And so she becomes a coach, and I think that it's made me take the coaching aspect of yoga more seriously, the teaching side of it, after having an injury myself. It makes me more, I think, empathetic and understanding of those coming into the yoga realm who aren't athletes, because I've taught ballerinas who, my God, they're, athletes at the cure of, but then to teach older people, even like chair yoga, it's the movement that's really critical.
Yeah, I want to get into your teaching a bit more, but we have to take a short break now. We're speaking all about the benefits of yoga with Patricia Gavin, and we'll be right back. I hope you're enjoying the powerful insights I bring you every week on Dream Power Radio. Now, there's a way to get more. Sign up to be a subscriber. You'll get sneak previews of upcoming shows, exclusive access to material not heard on the podcast, and special giveaways designed to uplift your dreaming life. Become a Dream Power Radio subscriber today. Sign up now by clicking on the Support the Show link in the show notes.
Welcome back to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Yes, welcome back to Dream Power Radio. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, and we're talking about yoga with Patricia Gavin. Well, Patricia, you did say that you have been teaching yoga at many places. How did you end up managing to teach for the Kirov Ballet?
Well, I traveled after 2018. When I first finished my teacher training in 2014, I think like a lot of new teachers, I felt in my practice needed to be strengthened, and teaching was a little intimidating when you see like 30 people all in their bathing suits in a hot room, sweating, expecting you to deliver and talk for 90 minutes nonstop. It can be kind of a daunting experience. So I did travel and strengthen my practice the first couple of years after I completed Bikram training, teacher training. And then I went to recertification in 2018 and went to Vermont, and I taught up there for a little bit. And then, it motivated me, relate that experience, and motivated me to open just a small studio in Middleburg. And when I opened the studio, the first thing I did was a posture clinic. And I had the director from the Kirov come to the class. So when she came to the class, she asked me if I would be interested in teaching this summer at the ballet in Washington, D.C. It's now closed after COVID, but I had 100 ballerinas, and some were 8 to 13. I had one group 8 to 13, and then I had the 13 group professional in a large gymnasium in DC in the very hot summer. So it was a great experience because they're athletes. These girls are and guys, we had both men and women, were training for a career in dance. So they were very dedicated in their practice. So that's kind of how I started. And then COVID hit. And right before COVID, I had traveled to Thailand and India because I had an opportunity to teach and travel as an ambassador for Yogi. So I went to Phuket.
Yeah, and you chronicalized that in one of your books, right?
Yeah, I flew in to Beijing on the 1st of January, 2020 to an empty airport. And I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know quite what. And it wasn't until later in the month that Wuhan was shut down. And Wuhan was, most of the people, Phuket is like Wuhan's vacation capital. It's kind of like their Miami where they go for vacation. So they were getting ready for Chinese New Year and everything shut down right before Chinese New Year. Most of the Chinese weren't big Bikram practitioners. They had like all-inclusive resorts with Marriott or whatever that they go to in Phuket. But the studio started to get a little quieter towards the end of the month as, Wuhan shut down and there was worry about the virus. So I left at the end of January 2020, and I flew to India, and I was going to be there for a year. My plan was to travel and teach. And I wound up in Mumbai teaching for Miss India, Mandeep Sandhu, and she's lovely. She's in a new movie, I think, out in India called Tipsy. You can see on her Facebook pages, I see her posting quite a bit. But I taught in Mumbai, and that was lovely experience. I would go back in a heartbeat. And then when COVID was ramping up, I came back in February because I knew the lockdowns were coming. And then I did write about the experience because I thought it was really kind of a unique time, I think, to be traveling and teaching. And the yoga industry changed with COVID because a lot of studios shut down. So people were going more to Zoom and online methodology.
And did you find that training people in these other countries was different from training, let's say, Americans?
Well, Phuket was unique because it's a very international. You have a lot of Swedish there, a lot of Europeans, a lot of Chinese. And what I will say is that the thing that makes Bikram so unusual in terms of a type of yoga is when you have people teaching from all over the world, they learn in English, but then we teach two sets of the posture. So the first set's usually in the native language or in English, and then the second set's in the opposing language. So you can practice anywhere in the world. So with all of the instructors, he's trained, I think, like 15,000. There are studios all over the world when you're traveling where you can go in, you can take a class, and it doesn't matter if you speak the language or you don't, because, a portion of the class, the half of the class will be in English. So I think that was a very bright move on his part. It made the yoga international and accessible to everyone.
And obviously you've been all around the world teaching yoga and everything. Did you ever imagine this happening all those years ago when you were in the Air Force?
I wish. I went to school in San Francisco, and actually Bikram's first studio was in San Francisco. And I wish I had started earlier in my military career. I wish I'd known about it at that time. But I came from a pretty conservative background. I was raised in Washington, D.C. And I think even my family was skeptical when I said, hey, I'm going to yoga teacher training. That they were, she's crazy. But I think that maybe some of that has softened as it's become more, I don't know, popular, if popular is the word, but more widespread, the practice of yoga. I think there's still a lot of fear. People think it's a religion, but really it's a science of just self-examination. That's how I would describe it. And what you do with the devotional part of it is really up to the individual and their own beliefs. There's no pressure in yoga to believe any one thing. It's a physical science of the body to heal it. And so that's how I would kind of counter people's objections to it being a form of religion. It can be, but anything can be if you choose to believe.
Well, right. I mean, again, like you say, yoga has all those different arms, and the asana pose is one part of it. And many people are just happy to do that because of the physical and spiritual benefits they get from that. And then if they want to go further, they go further.
I know people talk about spiritual, but I would say it's more emotional and mental. It's the physical that helps you basically clear kind of the clutter that's in the mind. And so if you've got a lot of activity going on, where your mind and shut down, kind of aid. It's very helpful because it helps people focus on one point. But it's the other fallacies, people think, oh, it's chanting and, saying Om and all of that. Well, Bikram yoga is a hatha yoga. You have different forms of yoga, but hatha is a physical form of yoga. So it really is a physical class that's combined with the breath work, which separates it from exercise. And so when you combine the breath work with the physical postures, it helps through the science of the body quiet the mind. So that's how I would, explain it to someone who's skeptical about trying it. And you don't have to be flexible to do yoga. That's another fallacy.
Yes, I mean, but it also helps improve your flexibility if you wanted to.
Yeah, I think that's the 4 things that yoga really improves is your balance, flexibility. It improves strength, but mostly, and the warriors in the past that were the first practitioners in India, they practiced it so that they could maintain concentration and sit for longer periods, whether it be in the saddle or meditating, thinking about a problem. So with our sedentary lifestyle, I know Steve Jobs with Apple was a big proponent of yoga. And I think you see that in the products that his company has developed.
And I understand you're in the process of writing another book. What's that one going to be about?
I'm working on a book called Pink Flamingo, and really it's about the healing process of Bikram yoga. It's been a bit of a journey losing my mobility over the last year and then trying to get it back through the yoga. There's some postures that were within my range of motion that aren't anymore because of an injury with my knee and the torn meniscus. But it's also made me more aware of other yoga modalities like vinyasa and restorative yoga. And then there's also yin yoga, which is like holding postures for a longer time to target the parts of the body that connect the tissue and the muscles and the bones together. It kind of keeps your skin. You asked me about what I noticed when I went through Bikram training. And that was something else that I noticed is that a lot of times when people lose weight, their skin kind of becomes loose, where their tissue becomes looser and not attached to the bone in the body. And because of the heat, if you think of how a turkey is basted, I think that maybe is kind of a good example because the skin adheres to the tissue when you are in the hot room doing the postures. So it's good for the face. It's good for the body. If you're trying to maintain your health, I think that it helps that way. So, I mean, I'll be 65. I'm now Medicare eligible. And I think it's really helped in the aging process for me. And probably I wouldn't have my mobility if I had been active with yoga over the last 10 years. After the accident, I probably would not have been able to recover, So I credit the yoga with that.
Yeah. And like you say, you don't have to be super flexible or super powerful. You could just take it where you are and work it.
No, yeah. I mean, you start wherever you are in yoga. I mean, when I went into the yoga room, I couldn't initially I was having problems getting my arms above my head because of falling in the shower. So, the heat, the one thing about the heat in the hot yoga is it helps to speed healing and soften that tissue. So I would recommend it to anyone that's having mobility issues or even arthritis, because even just being in the hot room, it helps with the lubrication of the joints because you have calcium in your joints, which becomes crystallized like shards of glass. And when it's forced back into solution, it makes those joints smoother. So I would recommend it just from that standpoint for anyone, really. If you have a heart issue, obviously you have to talk to your doctor. And if you have medical issues, you should talk to your doctor before you go into any kind of program. But I think that it can be beneficial because you can, with the postures repeated twice, you go in as a beginner and you kind of watch what people are doing in the row who've been there and are seasoned practitioners. And then you can try the posture. And usually there's a bar in the back of the room. So you have a little bit more stability if you're having balance issues that you can try it. So it just takes a while to learn to breathe in the hot room. You have to adapt to breathing. It's like if you go from a cold environment to Miami, and it's sweltering hot, you have to learn to adapt to that humidity.
Yes, I've been many times. I've walked out of the Miami airport and been accosted with a huge whiff of hot and humidity air. But no, it's all possible and it's all great. Well, Patricia, is there a final thought you have for our audience?
I think that the one quote that comes to mind is my first yoga instructor had 2 studios, gym here in DC, one in Tinleytown and then one in Alexandria. It's closed now. But he said slower is better. So the slower you go in yoga, the better you do. So I think that some people come in and they try and keep up and power through postures and whatnot. And really, the slower you do the posture and the longer you can hold it is, the challenge. So I think that would be my advice, even to practitioners or teachers. The slower you go, the better. Sometimes teachers want to go fast through the dialogue, and which was kind of the teaching instructions. And sometimes people in hard postures want them to do that because they don't have to hold the posture as long. It's not as difficult. But I think that just as you go into the postures, the slower you go, I think better. And the less likely you are to have injury too.
Oh, good advice for sure. And Patricia, how can people find out more about you and your books?
Let's see. I'm working right now. I'm going to be in Costa Rica this summer. I'm working on setting up retreats there. So I think the best way to follow me is probably on my Instagram account, which is, I don't post a lot of postures on there, but I do kind of post lifestyle tips and, Ayurvedic tips. So that's Yoga National USA. And that's probably a good place to follow me. And then from there, you can follow on Facebook. So yeah, I'll be posting postures and probably links to classes, online classes, because we're going to develop an online program with a property down in Costa Rica that's trying to invite people to come down and practice in the humid jungle outside of San Jose.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Well, Patricia, thank you so much for being on Dream Power Radio today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Okay. Well, we've been speaking about the power of yoga with Patricia Gavin. Hope you've enjoyed today's program. If so, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Until next time, this is Debbie Spector-Weissman saying, sweet dreams, everybody.
You've been listening to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman. For more information on Debbie or to sign up for her newsletter, go to dreampowerradio.com. This has been Dream Power Radio.